I remember the logo perfectly, that giant graffiti-style M that changed shape and color like a cultural chameleon. It was more than just a TV channel. It was a statement of principles, a direct window into the epicenter of cool. When that logo appeared on the screen, you knew you were about to see something that would define the way you dressed, the way you spoke, and of course, the soundtrack of your life. Now, if you tune in to that same channel, chances are you'll find a 24-hour marathon of a show with videos of people falling down, repeated endlessly. It's like visiting the grave of an old friend and finding that someone has set up a flea circus on the headstone. MTV's downfall wasn't a sudden accident. It was a slow death, a corporate suicide in slow motion. And today we're going to do the autopsy. The symbolic final blow came on its 40th anniversary, August 1st, 2021. Instead of celebrating 4 decades of cultural revolution with documentaries, specials, or even a humble retrospective of its most iconic videos, the channel aired, you guessed it, a non-stop marathon of ridiculousness. Not a single music video. Nothing. It was the final confirmation that the patient wasn't just dead, but that its corpse was being used as a puppet to sell cheap ads. We went from peak viewership with shows like Jersey Shore, which drew over 8 million people, to being a ghost channel whose only strategy seems to be hypnotizing its audience with the same content on repeat. But this story isn't just a nostalgic trip to mourn the music we no longer see on TV. It's much more than that. It's a masterclass in marketing. A case study of how one of the world's most powerful brands can lose its soul, its identity, and ultimately, its relevance. Throughout this story, we're going to unravel the 5 cardinal mistakes, the 5 strategic decisions that took MTV from being the arbiter of youth culture to becoming a distant echo of what it once was. So, get comfortable, because we're about to analyze the rise and spectacular implosion of music television. It all began with an original sin, a fundamental betrayal of its own name, the gradual abandonment of music. When MTV launched on August 1st, 1981, it did so with a prophecy. Video killed the radio star. And for a while, it was absolutely true. The channel was a revolutionary force that compelled the music industry to become visual. An artist no longer just needed a good song. They needed an image, a story, a video. The problem, from a business perspective, was that this model was a financial house of cards. MTV didn't pay record labels for the videos, but the labels didn't pay MTV to air them either. Its only source of income was advertising. And this is where consumer psychology comes into play. Watching music videos is a low-commitment activity. If you like the song, you stay. If not, you change the channel. Audience retention was a nightmare. It was like a restaurant that only serves 1 dish per hour. If the customer doesn't like it, they leave without ordering anything else. This volatility made it very difficult to sell advertising slots at premium prices. The first nail in the coffin of the M for music was a game show called Remote Control in 1987. It was the channel's first non-musical content, and it worked. Ratings went up. The executives learned a dangerous lesson. Drama and competition kept people in front of the screen much longer than a Bon Jovi video. Soon after, animated series like Beavis and Butthead arrived, which were brilliant because even though they weren't music, they still revolved around it. The 2 most famous idiots on television would sit and brutally simply criticize the very same videos the channel aired. It was a way to maintain the musical connection while experimenting with new formats. But this small crack in the dam was just the beginning. Soon, the water would start pouring in. And that water had a name, reality TV. If the first mistake was doubting music, the second was inventing a monster that would end up devouring everything, the reality show. In 1992, MTV launched The Real World, a social experiment that brought together 7 strangers in a New York apartment and simply filmed them. No script, no actors. It was a cultural atomic bomb. Not only was it a massive success, but it literally invented a television genre that would dominate the next 3 decades. From a marketing standpoint, it was a brilliant chess move. The production cost of a reality show was infinitely lower than that of a scripted series, and the return on investment was enormous. People were hooked on real drama, on the uncomfortable conversations about race, sexuality, and politics that characters in traditional series never had. MTV had found its new drug, and it was much more addictive and cheaper than music. The problem was that this drug had devastating side effects for the brand's identity. MTV stopped being the curator of cool and became the exploiter of other people's drama. It's as if a prestigious art gallery suddenly decided it could sell more tickets by organizing cockfights in the lobby. Maybe in the short term it fills the room, but in the long run, the reputation goes down the drain. The success of The Real World opened the floodgates. Suddenly, music programming started to be pushed aside to make way for a tsunami of shows that followed the same formula. We went from Yo MTV Raps, which gave a crucial platform to hip-hop culture, to shows that, while entertaining, drifted further and further from the musical core. The monster they had created was insatiable and demanded more and more drama, more and more lives exposed. And the worst part is that the audience devoured it. The network was simply following the data, optimizing its schedule to maximize viewing time. It was a logical decision from a spreadsheet perspective, but a betrayal from the heart of the brand. With the reality TV monster already unleashed and running wild, MTV entered what many consider its golden age. A golden age, yes, but also a blinding and ridiculously ostentatious one. And so we arrive at the 2000s, the era of excess, the peak, and the blindness of success. This was the MTV that many of us remember with a mix of fondness and second-hand embarrassment. It was the decade of TRL, Total Request Live, which turned Times Square into a daily madhouse of fans screaming for Britney Spears or NSYNC. It was the decade of Jackass, where a group of lunatics inflicted unbearable pain on themselves for our entertainment. And of course, it was the decade of iconic shows like MTV Cribs, where we watched rappers and pop stars show off their mansions with an almost poetic lack of modesty. And on Pimp My Ride, the show that made us all believe an old car could be turned into a nightclub on wheels with 12 plasma screens. MTV was a three-ring circus of pop culture and was absolutely on top of the world. Shows like Jersey Shore broke audience records with peaks of nearly 9 million viewers. Numbers that are unthinkable nowadays. Even in Latin America, the influence was so great that brilliant parodies emerged, like the Argentine animated series Alejo y Valentina, which mocked this entire cultural ecosystem with sharp and surreal humor. If your own audience parodies you with such wit and affection, it means you are the undisputed king. But here lies the third fatal mistake: the blindness of success. MTV was so busy counting the millions of dollars its reality TV empire was generating that it didn't see the digital guillotine being sharpened in a garage in California. The brand had become completely diluted. It was no longer music television, it was drama television, prank television, rich people television. They had abandoned their original niche, that of being the musical authority, to compete in the crowded space of general entertainment. They were winning the ratings battle in the short term, but they were losing the war for their soul. Success made them arrogant and slow. They thought they were invincible, an institution so big that nothing could bring it down. They thought the party would last forever. But while MTV was building its empire of glitter, muscles, and drama, 3 former PayPal employees were about to launch a website that would make their main business model, the music video, not only obsolete but also irrelevant. The digital guillotine fell in 2005 and it was called YouTube. This was the fourth and probably the most devastating of MTV's mistakes, a total inability to understand and adapt to the internet revolution. Overnight, the idea of waiting in front of a television for a programmer to decide which music video you would watch became archaic, almost prehistoric. Why wait for MTV to play your favorite artist's new video when you could watch it instantly on YouTube, anytime, anywhere, and as many times as you wanted? MTV had built its empire on a monopoly of visual music distribution, and YouTube demolished it in less than a year. The scale was simply incomparable. A video like Rihanna's Needed Me could rack up hundreds of millions of views on YouTube, a number MTV couldn't reach even if it played it on repeat for an entire month. The power had changed hands. Now artists could connect directly with their fans without the need for intermediaries. The bouncer at the cultural nightclub had been fired, and now everyone could get in for free. MTV's response was clumsy and too late. They saw YouTube as an enemy to ignore, not as a platform to integrate. They followed Blockbuster's playbook against Netflix. When the world changed, they decided to do more of the same, but with even more intensity. They doubled down on reality shows. If Jersey Shore worked, why not make 4 spin-offs? If Teen Mom was a hit, why not milk the drama of teenage pregnancy to exhaustion? Meanwhile, the young audience, their main target demographic, was migrating en masse to social media, to Instagram, to Twitter. Culture was no longer dictated from an ivory tower in New York. Now it was created and shared in a decentralized way by millions of people. The famous South Park episode, where the characters complained that MTV doesn't play music anymore, became a self-fulfilling prophecy. In 2010, the network made a symbolic but devastating decision. It removed the words music television from its logo. It was an official surrender. They no longer pretended to be what they once were. With its original purpose annihilated and its audience fleeing to greener, digital pastures, MTV was left with only one option: unconditional surrender. And that surrender brings us to the current state, the fifth and final act of this tragedy, the era of ridiculousness. After the collapse of the audience for its flagship reality shows and several failed attempts to revive musical formats like TRL in a post-YouTube world, MTV found itself at a dead end. Innovation is expensive and risky. Creating new shows that connect with young people is incredibly difficult. So they opted for the strategy of minimum effort and minimum risk. They found in ridiculousness the perfect product for an era of passive content. It's cheap to produce since it's based on viral internet videos. It's easy to watch. It doesn't require attention or intellectual engagement. And most importantly, it's infinitely repeatable. There is data showing that in some weeks the channel has aired more than 100 hours of this single program. It's the definition of zombie content. It keeps the channel alive by generating residual advertising revenue, but without soul, without purpose, and without any cultural ambition. Turning on MTV today is like visiting your grandmother's house and discovering she's thrown out all the furniture and now there's just a single chair in the middle of the living room where she sits watching videos of people falling down. It's, at the very least, concerning. The brand that once defined entire generations, that launched the careers of Madonna, Michael Jackson, and Nirvana, that taught us to be cynical with Daria and to laugh in the face of danger with Jackass, has become a filler channel, a vague memory of its former glory. The rocket that took off in 1981 with the promise of a revolution didn't crash in a spectacular explosion, but instead slowly faded out until it landed softly on a couch to watch viral videos, with the sound of canned laughter as its only epitaph. It's the most ironic and pathetic ending that could have been written for a cultural giant. And so the cycle is complete. From revolutionizing music to being devoured by the reality TV it created itself. From dominating pop culture to being crushed by the internet it failed to see coming. And from being an iconic brand to becoming just background noise on a channel. The story of MTV is a warning for any company. No matter how big you are, if you lose your identity and refuse to adapt, you'll become a relic. But now I want to know what you think. What was the exact moment for you when you felt MTV had died? Leave your opinion in the comments. By the way, I promise you'll love this video. It's the same tragedy, but with more pain, more money, and a lot more drama. See you there.